You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio, man. We are here once again, and man, we have another show lineup for y'all. Man, if you ready to talk sports, this is a episode you want to check out, man. We have a great guest. He is the one and only Warren. He does great work with the Baseline NBA podcast. He covers basketball, and we're gonna learn a little bit about him and his show, what he does. So, man, first and foremost, man, Warren, thank you for taking time in your schedule, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, fam. Really do appreciate the invite first and foremost, and just always excited to talk NBA basketball with anybody willing to listen to me, my ramblings and musings, my guy.
And you are more than a podcast host, man. You're also a journalist, and with that, you cover like the hottest topics in the NBA. I mean, I'm sure your head was like either spinning or going super happy with, all these trades, but kind of talk to us a little bit about your show, The Baseline NBA, and some of the things you cover.
I appreciate it, man. The Baseline is, wow, we're 10 years old now, if you can actually believe it. 10 years old in roughly mid-January. And partner of mine, we've been best friends, brothers for a very, very long time. Known that gentleman since I was about 5-6 years old. He came to me about 10 years ago and kind of at the height of my writing. I did some writing at Yahoo, Dime Magazine, and some other outlets. And he said, hey, bro, the podcast thing is kind of popping off right now. Would you want to, kind of just talk about the game as well as much as you write about it? And I was hesitant at first, and he really was a catalyst of it. But ever since then, man, we've been keeping this thing pushing. So Callie and I, man, just make sure you're following us on Twitter at NBA Baseline. We're on Instagram as well too. But 10 years in the game, we've been doing stuff from player interviews, coaches, obviously journalists, fans of the game, players and things like that as well too. We've been on the show over the course of the years, and we do it from just an example of, hey, X's and O's. We get into some analytics, but we also just kind of talk like two friends, right? I wouldn't say it's quite barbershop style, but two friends with definitely some varying opinions on it. And again, he's masterful at what he does, and I like to think I put in the work to try to be, so I can just try to keep up with him.
And you being a journalist, because you mentioned that, and some of the outlets that you've been able to work with, and having that opportunity to grow your platform. What's so important for like people who cover sports, like, because you know how that works because you've been there, and you know how that's supposed to tune out. So what's some of the important things that in journalist world that y'all do to make sure that things are accurate, but also you're doing it in a respectful manner?
And I think, one thing is just a certain level of consistency. Like that has to be there. So if you're writing and, or podcasting, however you're going about it, you just need to continue to keep at it. Whether one person listens or 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people listen, you have to continue pushing out that content, and building the rapport, I think, with your audience is important as well too. So don't try to be something that you're not. And I've made some mistakes where, I thought, well, maybe do I want to try to be like Woj or Shams or whatever the case may be? And like, I don't have those connects. I don't have, those relationships, but these different levels of front office people and so forth and so forth. So I understand that I can't be a breaking news guy. I'm going to have to react to it or write about it kind of after the news has dropped. So you find the proverbial lane that you want to be in. And this sports, like all businesses, are very much relationship driven. So whether you're trying to build a rapport with a player, coach, general manager, whoever it is, even other journalists, just be respectful. And some things are on the record and some things aren't. And I think you have to be able to know the difference with that as well too, because I can tell you, point blank, there's an agent that I used to work with, and he was like, hey, I need you to basically, kind of make sure my guys look good. And it was like, I had to say, it's like, all right, well, do I want to continue this relationship? Especially, to continue to build my profile to some degree, or do I, care one way or another, but whether that player or the people that he brought to me looked good or not? So then that was a hard decision I think I had to make at one point as well too. And I'm not somebody who can, not tell the truth about a situation. So, again, I pick and choose kind of like who and I interact with and how often, pretty wisely. But when you're coming up, sometimes you don't always have those luxuries. So again, I've been in it for a little while now and, kind of in a space now where I can podcast and interview and talk to who I want to talk to and, portray it in the way that I feel is real, for at least for me and, what the client or whoever I'm working with, again, getting the real story out there without having to worry about fluff pieces or lying about anything like that.
Let's Refocus Radio, talking to Warren Shaw, and he's part of the Baseline NBA podcast, but you also are co-founder of the 19M Group. Tell us about this media group and how that platform is growing.
Oh, brother, I really appreciate you asking. Yeah, 19 Media Group was founded about a year and some change ago. Basically podcasters and content creators kind of like myself who have been around the block maybe a little bit, or weren't really happy with the way certain networks were treating them. So if you ever podcast and been on a podcast network, there's a lot of stuff when it comes to the revenue and the contracts and things like that too, and the perceived level of promotion that you'll receive. And it's very, very similar to being in the music business. People just try to sign you for the sake of signing you. And so at the end of the day, me and some other podcasters on the network currently, we had made some mistakes, on other networks and say, what, can we do this junk ourselves? And, we just decided, we're going to do that. So it is Black owned. All of us, just really try to look out for each other. We have multiple shows on the 19 Media Group network, founded by Jabari Davis, who now works for iHeartRadio specifically, and then Malik Johnson. So those two gentlemen and myself are the founders of the network. We have anything from wrestling on there to a travel show that kind of talks about small towns. It's actually called Small Town USA. We have Orlando Magic coverage, LA Lakers coverage, other basketball, hip hop content as well too. Another show called Hip Hop Hidden Gems. Hip to the Games is another show where they blend hip hop and basketball. We got golf, got football. We're always looking for new podcasts out there. But if you're rocking with us, man, you gotta. And I know it's a little bit of a misnomer, but you got to be kind of family orientated. And understand that like we're not just out here, and it's not about all the numbers, and we may not all have not all of our shows get thousands and thousands of downloads, but we're out here pushing out good content. We're consistent. We love each other, and we want people to love the content that they're producing. And then we really feel in some ways that the good stuff will come, and ads and participants and people interacting with the show, they'll come as long as you're consistent with it too. So that's what 19 Media Group is about, man, amplifying voices together. And
I'm glad you touched on that, because you're separating yourself from those who treat this podcast world like a hobby versus a business. And I think to a lot of people, they still don't understand the podcast world can legit be an opportunity to be a business. With your personal experience building this with you and your, I guess you can say your community, what was some of the hurdles you had to overcome in the beginning as far as turning this from a hobby? Now, I wouldn't say a hobby because you've been doing this professionally as a journalist, but turning something into an idea, into a legit opportunity to grow as a business.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you just have to understand that there's going to be a lot of no's. And as I alluded to, you may not bust out the gate with, thousands of people trying to listen to your show. Yeah. So that can't discourage you. And I'll be point blank honest. One of the things you said there was, whether it's a hobby or you're trying to be serious about it. And we've had some, and it's fine. I think, and we had to make some decisions about, what the future of working with the network was going to look like. So while we are family orientated, it's still, there's a business aspect to it, and we need consistency, and we need you to be able to put shows out. And, so we were able to do that with, for those shows that are on our network, but we also said goodbye to some other shows that wanted it to be more of a passing thing for them. And that's fine. And I think, we were still friends with those folks, and it makes a lot of sense for how they wanted to operate. But I can't go to an advertiser in any capacity and say, hey, well, they may do a show this week or they may not. You know what I mean? So, they don't want to hear that. So I think for us, it's about being as serious as we possibly can about it while being as, business orientated, but still maintaining a level of, family feel, because we want everybody to be successful. And so we're going to try to help provide the tools for everybody to be successful and put everybody in those spaces, because we want everybody to win. So our more popular shows, we keep those rocking, but some of the shows are maybe not as popular, we keep pushing them just as hard because that's what's important and because we believe in the content that they're producing. So yeah, man, 19 Media Group is just really kind of about that, making sure we can connect with communities and diverse backgrounds and cultures. And we really try to make sure that, that is kind of at the forefront of what we do. We don't want the fake stuff. We want it to be real, but you have to be real about what it is you're trying to do within the podcast space as well, too.
And you mentioned earlier about covering certain games in NBA, and I think that's awesome because that once again kind of separates you from those who treat it like a hobby versus those who are really going at it in a real professional way. So kind of break that down for the audience. What does it look like for someone who's in that media space where they have the opportunity to cover sports? What's the correct way, like getting credentials and whatnot?
Yeah. So again, most organizations, even minor league or professional, they're going to want to see a certain level of consistency in what you do. So if you're a podcaster, make sure you have a breadth of shows for them to reference. If you are a writer or a journalist, make sure there's a bunch of articles where you've, written about that topic, that team, or whatever the case would be. And so we've been able to translate some of this into, things even outside of sports and, covering entertainment and things like that as well, too. They just need to see that you're for real and not just, hey, I want to get into the game for free. Because there's a lot of hustlers out there. Yeah. And so these organizations have to be very discerning about who they're letting into their doors, because they wouldn't want any, kind of randos, if you were walking around their locker rooms or coming to their events and spaces. So you kind of have to do some level of legwork in advance. And I would say it is a little bit more open now because media is so vast and diverse. So it's not as, I don't know how raw I can speak on your show, but it's not, the boys club or the golf club, if you will, where, only certain people could be let in the door on, in certain events and spaces. So there is opportunity, but at the same time, they're going to be discerning about that. So as I said before, it's a matter of like, hey, if you first go around and, they tell you no, then all right, well, come back next year or for the next time. You know what I mean? Be persistent, consistent, but you got to figure out a way to not also be overbearing. I'll tell you one quick story when it comes to game coverage, if you will. When I was writing, I live in South Florida. I don't like the Miami Heat. I don't like, any of the Florida teams, Orlando Magic. But when I was starting my writing career, Miami was very, very hard, especially the quote unquote bloggers, right? So, KD called them blog boys. Like Miami wasn't letting any bloggers in. You need to be with a national reputable site at the time. And I was with an up and coming, site. The Orlando Magic were not as discerning, if you will. And so I was able to write, I started covering the Magic, even though I didn't necessarily care about that team, but it was a means to an end. And then I would able to actually get credentialed. So I'd go to Orlando. It was a 3-hour ride for me, but I'd go to Orlando for some of their bigger games. So when they'd play the Lakers or the Clippers, that was Lob City Clipper days, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd be in the locker room in coverage. And that's where I met some of the more national writers. And they even said, like, listen, even when you're talking to players, it's not always about trying to get a story out of them. Like sometimes you try to talk to them like human beings and just like, hey, how you doing? How's your day? How's your kids, et cetera, et cetera. And then, next two times you see them, maybe you can kind of like press them for some questions about, whatever it is, a story. So they want to be treated like human beings. So anyway, that's my little quick story in saying that, hey, I left even the region that I technically lived in and found ways in essence to go cover. But no, you don't even do that now, especially since COVID, because there's a lot of virtual media availability. So I think if you're looking for ways to get into that, it's just, again, you have to have a level of consistency. You'll have to do some things like maybe writing about a show or writing about an actor. And then, you can get into their press kit and, kind of maybe make some ways and maybe you can get a virtual interview that way if you're not able to do it physically.
I'm glad you touched on that because I know a lot of people who are interested in things like that, trying to cover their sports in their city where they live in, or just have that dream to, man, I want to cover just sports in general and write about it and have opportunity to have credentials to be behind the scenes and ask questions to coaches, what have you. It's like you said, it just takes that consistency of work. You got to put the work in. You can't just be like, oh, I'd love to do this. And then someone just gives you opportunity. Because I know some people who, friends of mine, because I work in the radio business, and it's the same thing. They had to put in the blood, sweat, and tears. The people that they network with were saying the same thing. You just got to earn your stripes, and before you know it, opportunities just kind of come your way because they respect your professionalism.
Yeah, there are just no shortcuts, and I know we're in a, I want it fast, I want it now society, and there are things where maybe you don't have to work as hard, work as hard as long, but you do have to work. And I think,
Yeah.
that's the people that feel like they don't have to work at all and they should just be given an opportunity because they asked for it. That's where you're kind of lost, if you will. So, I'm old enough to understand the old school mentality and, hey, you got to put in your blood, sweat, and tears for X amount of years and you grind, and also understand new school mentality. It's like, yo, I'm not putting 20 years before I get this opportunity. But there is a happy median, right? And there are some things that are going to be absolute, and I'd say almost absolute forever. But because there's so many different lanes to travel within now, there are so many opportunities. So I think you got to just figure out, okay, well, what can you be consistent at, be different at, and provide in a way, and it can't always be about you trying to get something. And I think that's where sometimes in this space it gets lost. And I've heard many people in various conferences and things that I've been to, it's saying you have to humble yourself as, all right, well, what can I offer? And I'm not famous in any capacity, but people who know me well will know I say is like, I always tell you, like, all right, I need this to be a win-win situation. Even if I'm the one, I was like, I don't want to be the one that's solely benefiting from it. How can I make sure that I help you in whatever the pursuit is? And I think, again, with that level of humility, you're going to get, as I say, you try more bees with honey, as opposed to just saying, hey, I want, or I deserve. Is how can you also make the situation beneficial to them with whatever your content or coverage is ultimately going to be.
Yes, it's like what are you bringing to the table to help everybody else eat? But yeah, man, we're talking to Warren Shaw, and the baseline, we got to talk about some NBA. I'm gonna let you have the floor. What do you see right now in this season in the NBA? What excites you, man?
I think it's parity. Everybody, you saw at the trade deadline, there were more buyers than I'd say sellers, if you will. People making moves to solidify their potential standing to try to get into this thing. So nobody's afraid of anybody who they see at the top of their conferences right now, especially I think in the East. Well, Milwaukee and Boston are sitting fairly well now, even after Brooklyn kind of dismantled their roster. You saw a team like Chicago not sell, and they thought they might move off. You saw a team like Toronto not sell; they actually bought. Miami now trying to be very active in the buyout market. To me, it just signifies that everybody feels like they have a chance, that it's wide open. They realize the Warriors are wounded, and not maybe not championship odds favorites to kind of repeat. While you do have to defeat the champs, I don't think everyone's afraid of them. So when you look over to the West, you look at Denver, and they still have their injury issues with Jamal Murray. He's battling something, I guess, with his knee again right now, and Michael Porter Jr. always a little bit frail. While Jokic is definitely the two-time MVP, no one, I don't think, is afraid of Denver, and no one's afraid of Memphis. Memphis does a lot of talking, but they haven't won anything yet. So that's what I saw, and that's what I see this year. It's just a lot of parity. Everybody feels like they have a shot, and I think everybody's right. And it's going to be, as they say, styles make fights. It's really going to be how matches play out when it comes to seeding that will ultimately crown our NBA champion. Like, I couldn't even tell you like who the odds-on favorite is, because I think it really is going to be dependent on how each team plays themselves out in the actual playoffs, like who they get matched up with, because certain teams just don't match up very well.
And it's funny you mentioned the Memphis Grizzlies, because it's a hot topic right now with what's going on with the Lakers and that whole situation. What do you think is, I know you kind of mentioned what you said moments ago, but what do you see LeBron needing for the Lakers to, I guess, get better? If that's okay to say.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So they made all these moves, right? So I think Laker fans are dancing on the timeline. Like, they are ecstatic. And I think they have to be, because they made moves that make sense on paper. But paper champions have never won anything. And I think we need to see how it all plays itself out. Chemistry is very, very important. And you have 20 something games to build a chemistry with basically five new players who you actually intend to play within your rotation. It's not like these guys are going to the bench. So how do you mix that? So to answer your question directly, it's the continuity of what they brought in that needs to be established. But key and most paramount to all of that is Anthony Davis's health and engagement. It doesn't mean anything if Rui Hachimura now was, whatever, he's averaging, 15 and 7 or what the case may be, if Anthony Davis is not the monster that Anthony Davis is supposed to be from a talent standpoint. So to me, that's where LeBron and the Lakers are just needing to make sure they can keep AD healthy for the playoff run while integrating all these new pieces. So Darvin Ham really he's the coach. He's got to figure out how the rotations are going to look and how they're going to share the basketball, with all those new parts and pieces. They got some decent glue guys, especially in Vanderbilt. I think that was one of the better moves of the trade deadline. But Malik Beasley is a guy he likes to shoot it. He likes to let it fly. So will he get enough of those opportunities? With D'Angelo Russell now in tow and Anthony Davis and LeBron, all trying to get the basketball. So I don't think Malik Beasley was going to derail them per se, but he's somebody who has to understand a role now. He can't let it rock like how he was in Utah. So and at the end of the day, again, it's the continuity of those players and then Anthony Davis's health overall. But I think that's a great question.
And I know we touched on the East a little bit, but we know that KD now is with Booker in the Suns. Do you see any sparks that kind of says, hey, they might be kind of big in the West? What do you think about their team and how they're stacked right now?
I mean, exactly like I said with the Lakers, in some ways, they're on paper, they are very scary. But Durant, he hasn't come back yet until probably won't see him until after the All-Star break. But on paper, yeah, I think there's something to be worried about there, and they just got to fill out the rest of the roster. But they have a lot of guys hurt. Even Campaign, he's hurt as well too, and he hasn't come back from his injury. Landry Shamet is also hurt, so. Again, they got to build in this new chemistry, this new team. TJ Warren is still coming back from basically 2 years of being hurt. And now Durant as well, in addition to what is a frail Chris Paul at this stage of his career and Devin Booker. But talent-wise, bucket for bucket, even in terms of size, yeah, they're right there. And the fact that the Phoenix Suns were able to get Durant without having to give up Ayton or Chris Paul or Booker in any capacity is really, really a credit to them. So I think people have a right to keep an eye on what's going on over there, but I can't say, oh, they're the prohibitive favorite, because I just don't think there is a prohibitive favorite, but they're going to have something to say about this thing one way or other, especially if KD can stay healthy.
Man, good points. I mean, people want to learn more and understand the NBA better, because I think that's what makes shows separate from other shows is when you can break down the league and talk about what's going on in the league. People can go check out NBA Trade. Excuse me. That's your episode, your most recent episode. You touched on NBA Trade Deadline Edition. They can check out your podcast, the Baseline NBA Podcast. But before we let you go, man, when you're on your podcast platform, you're breaking down the league. And I think that's very important, because when people are not educated on certain things, then it's like you're just talking. You're filling out time. How important is it for people who cover sports in general to not just talk about what they think is great or whatever, but really study the game and the players?
Yeah, no, that part is immense. Like, you have to watch games. If you have the time, and I guess none of us are going to say that they actually do, but if you can, watch film, look at the numbers, see how those numbers kind of tell the story that, you might have seen as well. I don't think, or again, I said, I'm middle-aged, if you will. So I operate in kind of the old school and the new. So I'm not like this analytics nerd, and I'm not like this eye test, king. It has to be one way or the other. Yeah. You have to mix the best of all of those situations. But when I do research, sometimes I really look at numbers and I'm like, oh man. And I might be going into doing a podcast with a preconceived notion, and then I go look at numbers and I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So that's just me varying by the eye test. I thought it was one way, but the numbers don't resonate to that to some degree. I can give you like a little bit of an example. I was almost going to do a show, or do not a show, but a segment on a sophomore slump. And when I looked at it, comparing like Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes, I was like, their numbers are slightly down, but it's not as down to the point where you'd say they're in a slump. And they're also in just very different situations, especially Mobley with Donovan Mitchell now on the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I was like, all right, well, do I just go with this, for the sake of a narrative or for quote unquote clicks or views or whatever the case may be? I was wrong. That it's not as bad as I was thinking it was, at least to make a segment about it. So I think, again, that's where you have to go and compare things that are happening, look at the numbers, watch the games intently, and then kind of see if you can see, any of the, kind of the tea leaves, if you will, on what's going on with that team or that roster. But it's so important to watch games, and not just look at the box score. Like, you have to kind of see what people are doing and how rotations and things like that play out as well too.
Yeah, because kind of like what you talked about earlier, how sometimes platforms, blogs, or whatever, the players or coaches may not appreciate them as much. And do you see, I mean, you're inside, so do you see how things are totally different when the coaches and the players respect the platform more because they do their homework and take the time to kind of, like you said earlier, get to know the players on a human level?
Yeah. I mean, that part of it can't be stressed enough. So people are going to ultimately do what they feel is going to make them successful. And I understand that. So I'm not into, again, doing it for the gram, for clicks or whatever. Like it's not my vibe. And respect whoever, if that's what it boils down to. I just know, as you just alluded to, if you're able to build the rapport. And I think even starting off as somebody who tells the truth from what your perspective of the truth is, as opposed to being sensationalizing things, then when you actually get to be in those spaces and you get to meet players or coaches or whoever, executives, they can start to have a little bit of a respect for you. But as I said before, like, you just really can't just come out with your hands out, oh, gimme. You should probably really try to build the story first and foremost, or build a rapport with that person first and foremost. And then, you can tell the story later on. But I know sometimes feel like, hey, I only got one shot, you know what I mean? Like Eminem, what the case would be, I may never be in this room again to talk to this player. I'm going to go full bore, and that works at times too. But again, everybody has to find their niche. And my niche has been definitely slow and steady. And I'm fine being that. Anytime I try to rush things or be different from who I am, that's when I get burned. So I'm going to do what works for me. And I would suggest everybody do what's best for them. But as always, treat people like human beings first and foremost.
Man, that's good stuff, man. You can go to the website again for the media group. That is 19mediagroup.com. Check out all the amazing shows that they're hosting and learn a little bit more about that family over there. Also, man, follow the Baseline on Twitter and also follow Warren Shaw on Twitter. But most importantly, we all know this in the podcast world. Make sure you go leave a review on the Baseline NBA podcast. That helps it grow. That helps more people find it. Before I let you go, man, what would you like to share with the audience as far as like how they can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, again, 1,000% really do appreciate this. And to your friends, listeners, keep rocking with my guy here, doing amazing stuff here. Who's got the sultry voice, got the great insight. And if you want to rock with us, you can again follow me at Shaw Sports NBA. You can also follow my other show, Dope Interviews. That's where I interview people from the sports and entertainment world as well too. Just did a recent interview with Lil Meech from BMF. If you're into the TV thing on Stars, so check that out on YouTube or your favorite podcast platforms. But make sure you rock with 19 Media Group, Gimmick Infringement, Hip to the Games, Hip Hop Hidden Gems Golf, Hidden Gem Football. We got so much stuff going on. Just let us know. And hey, we're also looking for new talent at some point as well too. So let us know if you're interested in that and you're about your business first and foremost.
Man, I gotta cut it there, but maybe open up a can of worms. We start talking about hip hop culture. I'm like, okay, that was cool, man. I like that little drop teaser right there. But no, I appreciate your time, Warren. Make sure y'all go do him a favor. Follow him on Twitter. Follow on any network, because I'm telling you, he's growing super fast. But make sure you go to the Baseline NBA podcast, leave a review and support him. I want to say thank you for taking time in your schedule talking to Army Focus Radio, man.
Yeah, brother. Continued success to you and yours, family, and definitely appreciate this. Happy to hop on any other time, brother. Thank you so much.